Watson, and today we're going to do a second grade literary elements lesson plan. My Common Core State Standard is RL 2.1. My objective is going to be to ask and answer such questions as who, what, where, when, and why to demonstrate the understanding of key details in a text. We're going to review what to look for when describing a character, what the character looks like, how does the character respond to situations, important things about the character. So, yesterday we would have talked about taking a character out of a story and breaking that character up. Our first activity that we're going to do is actually a review of yesterday, just to make sure that that is uh, good and implanted. And then my purpose is to have a better understanding of literary elements in a story. Today we're going to evaluate a picture book and discuss the character, the setting, the events, problems, and solutions that occurred in the story. Um, Tomorrow we will continue talking about elements of a story. And our motivation for today is going to be reading Born and Bred in the Great Depression. This is a really good book. It's an autobiography. It's a historical biography. The little boy in the story is the author's father. The book was written by Jonah Winter, and the book is about his dad, John Winter. So this is actually the book. It's Jonah talking to his dad about his dad's upbringing in the Great Depression. Um, and here we go. I'll read the story now. These are pictures, actual pictures of John Winter, Granny Winter, and Grandpa Winter, and we'll meet them. We'll meet them in this story. Where you grew up on the edge of town, next to the tracks, you could hear the trains going by at night. East Texas, the 1930s, the Great Depression. In that tiny white frame house, there were 10 of you, 8 kids and your parents in 4 small rooms. You slept at the foot of one bed because there were only 2 beds and you were the youngest. You had to read by kerosene lanterns because you couldn't afford electricity. You got your water from a well because there was no indoor plumbing. There were no toilets, so you had to use an outhouse. I know because you've told me, Dad, this was the world you grew up in. There weren't any jobs, or not many, and sometimes your dad, Grandpa Winter, couldn't find work. He'd make the slow walk home empty handed, past the storefronts, over the bridge, all the way to the edge of town, where the poorest people lived. Waiting for him there were 9 mouths to feed, with no money. Some mornings at the lumberyard, when Grandpa sometimes worked, he had to run a foot race against other men like him. If he won, that meant he got to work that day. That meant he'd won the right to sweat in the hot Texas sun, painting railroad ties with tar, hoisting them up when they were dry, for 10 cents an hour. Low paying work was better than no work at all. During those years, you spent your summers daydreaming, exploring the woods behind your house. I wonder what you dreamed about. Were you dreaming of a different world? With no money for shoes, your feet got tough as leather walking barefoot down the gravel roads. Walking on the hot rails day after day, that's what you've said. But you've also said you never went hungry. There were vegetables and fruit from the garden, corn and okra, tomatoes, watermelons, peas and potatoes, and collard greens. What you couldn't eat right away, your mom would store in mason jars. Apples and peaches and pears sealed until the winter. And there were always eggs, and there were often chickens. Everyone's favorite, fried up in a cast iron skillet. How hard Granny Winter must have worked, feeding so many people, especially with you and David and Harry and Lou and Ada and Oletta all too young to help. The way you describe her, Granny Winter did everything: cooking, cleaning, gardening, milking. But even as strong and as tough as she went a little crazy sometimes. You said that she was so afraid of storms. She'd make you all go down in the storm cellar where she'd cry and pray, wailing, "Oh, Lord, we're all gonna die." She wasn't scared of much else, though. Like the time a bull wandered into your pasture through an open gate, She just grabbed it by its horns and let it out. Sometimes it's hard to believe this world is even real. Maybe I've remembered it wrong. Did Grandpa Winter really know a hermit who lived in the woods and ate beans from a jar? Did Granny Winter really have to fire up the wood burning stove every day, even in the summer, to heat up water to wash clothes on a washboard? Did you really see hobos leave little markings right on your mailbox? A code? To let other hobos know that this house was friendly? Granny Winter gave them mashed bean sandwiches and leftover chicken in exchange for their chopping wood, and while they chopped, your father would listen to their stories, ask them where they'd been, where they were headed, sleeping in boxcars 1,000 miles away from home, riding the rails from one strange town to the next. No money, no family. How did they survive? On the radio, you'd hear what life was like in those northern cities, far away, where people who'd lost their homes had to move into shacks made of cardboard. Side by side with other shacks, makeshift towns and public parks, Hoovervilles, you called them, named after President Herbert Hoover, whom many blamed for the Great Depression. I don't know what caused it, you said. All I know is that poor as we were, my folks never took one dime from the government. Maybe they should have. Maybe that would have made life easier for you. But somehow, Dad, you survived. And there were things that made life bearable. A trip with your father to the ice house, riding up front in his old Model T to pick up a block of ice. At Christmas, you might not have gotten many toys, but it was magical to watch the trains pass by, to see the blue lights twinkling in the windows of the dining car. And it was a good day if you got to play chess with your dad. Or listen to him play the banjo on the porch in his special style, 2 fingers gone from a lumber mill accident. You tell me. You tell me he'd read a library book every night in that dim light from the kerosene lamps after the cares of the day were done. When I think of the Great Depression, I picture a whole country of people tough as Grandpa Granny Winter, not giving up, even when it seemed like there was nothing left to lose, waiting out a storm that seemed like it would never end, and then finally waking to the blue skies of better days. And I see you, Dad, in your little overalls, listening to the trains, walking through the woods, learning to love those things that didn't cost a penny. And there are the pictures again. So this story is really, it's an awesome story, and I think the kids would really feel something when they read it. Um, it kind of puts into perspective what you have today versus what they had then. Uh, and we'll talk about a little more, at the closing of the story. I would then go into, we would talk about the Great Depression and what happened and how it affected people, just so that the children could get a connection, a life connection to a story that they've read. Um, so then at this point, I would pass out the character characterization sheet, and this is the breakdown of the character, the name of the character, what does it look like, what would you do if you were the character, what things does the character do, do you like the character, why or why not, something important about the character, and we're going to be breaking down John Winter, so the little boy is who we're going to talk about here. And then after we have a good grasp on breaking down the character, then we're going to break up into small groups of 4. And I will pass out the Grammar Yammer worksheet. And this one, we're not breaking any characters down, but we're going more into actual elements of the story. We have the characters. Who are the characters? Grandma Winter, Grandpa Winter, John. The setting is going to cover the when and the where. And then our problem, we're going to talk about the problems. As a class, we'll talk about this worksheet. The problem, there was no money, there was no food, people were poor, people had to give up their houses, all these different things. And then the events that occurred in the story. The dad losing two fingers at the lumber mill, having to run foot races for works, playing chess with his dad, solutions to the problem. Um, Obviously, they had their own garden and chickens to produce eggs and meat. Mom would put them up. And then after we discuss this as a class, we're going to break up into groups of four, and they're going to fill this out individually. Some students might get more answers than the others. Some students might find different things in the story that others didn't. It's a good way for everybody to be involved in breaking down the story. For homework, we're going to take this sheet home again, and they're going to either pick out a book from the library or one that they already have at home, and they're going to break the book down into character, setting, problem, events, and solutions so that we get a better grasp of who, what, when, where, how things happen in a story. And then then I will be able to gauge where we're at, what we need to review. Special needs children can work in a small group or one-on-one with the para. Um, Remediation, if any students need help during silent time, they can come to the small group table with me and we can go over some things. And as the enrichment would be the discussing of the Great Depression in our nation's history so that they can connect to history of their country to a story that they've written.